Hello learners, this is Shravanti Kundu Saha, Assistant Professor, Department of English at Pandit Sundar Lal Sharma Open University, Chhattisgarh, Bilaspur. I welcome you all to another virtual lecture. Today in this video we are going to read a brilliant poem by John Keats named Ode to a Nightingale. In this video, we are going to discuss the context of the poem, various different images, and also talk about the poem which mesmerized the reader and critics throughout the ages. The important thing to read the ode lies in the fact that it reflects the progress of Keats's ideas and thoughts. Let's start the poem Ode to a Nightingale. John Keats belonged to the second generation of romantic poets. The strange thing about the second generation romantic is that they all die in a very young age. But what's so special about Keats? Why he was different from other fellow poets like P.B. Shelley among others who died pretty early? The special mention about Keats is that unlike others, he was carrying a death sentence. That is why no matter how much we discuss any work by him, it never seems to be complete unless we reflect to the fact that he died so early. Again, his parents were not wealthy, still he got a decent education in a private institution as his parents aspired him to be a man of importance. He himself was infused with his parents' ambition and aspired to become a doctor. He soon found that his health is not permitting him. He was advised by the doctor to move to a warmer climate. When he was about to leave for Rome, Keats wrote Fanny Brawne, with whom he was in love, on 13th October 1819. His letter, which you can see in this slide, the tone of an utmost love affair is prominent. He had been increasingly ill by the beginning of 1820. The evidence of the infection of tuberculosis was clear. He realized that it was his death warrant, and from that time an amount of sustainable work for him became impossible. In September 1820, Keats left Rome, knowing he would probably never see Brawne again. He realized that it is not possible for him to be with his love forever, because his forever is very short-lived. The first month of 1821 marked a slow and steady decline into the final stage of tuberculosis, and most fatally, John Keats died in Rome on February 23, 1821. He chooses to express everything in his mind, and poetry became the outlet for him. From a very young age till he was approaching the age of 25, things become pretty intense for him. Finally, he got the stage where he poured his soul in writing ode after an ode. We get to see the cream of his creativity in those odes. Ode to a Nightingale is cherished to represent more than his expression of philosophy. Rather, it is a series of questions which were coming to his mind. Now, discussing the backdrop of the poem, we need to remember that during the spring of 1819, Keats stayed with Charles Browne at Wentworth, and in this stay, the song of the nightingale in the surrounding woods inspired him to introspect into the idea of death. Moving towards the poem, we need to understand what the form of poetry called an ode is. All you can see in this slide that ode is ceremonious poem on an occasion of public or private dignity in which personal emotion and general meditation are united. In this slide, the characteristics of an ode and its different types are mentioned. On July 1819, the poem got published in Quarterly Annals after numerous corrections on the first draft of the poem. As all of you can see in the slide that though Keats believed in spontaneity, but at the same time he was conscious towards language. This draft with correction tells the story behind Keats's creative power. Further in this slide, we can see the brief synopsis of the poem where the major understanding of the text is mentioned in a snapshot. Without wasting much time, let's start reading the poem. The first stanza of the poem starts with an impassionate address. There is no mention of the nightingale in the first line. Rather, it starts with reflecting upon poet's mental state. It narrates a dreamy state where he is conscious about his sensations. The reference to hemlock reminds us of the tragic death of Socrates, who was forced to take it. The hemlock is a poisonous potion which gradually takes away the sensation and brings a slow death which is not painful. In a similar pattern, the speaker compares his present state to that of an intoxicated being. In the next line, the speaker mentions 1 minute passed and Lith words had sunk. So what is Lith? According to myths, Lith is the river of forgetfulness, where the reference confirms that one need to forget the worldliness to cross over to the other world. Here the poet refers to the process of suspension and cleaning which takes away his memories. His memory of his life is not very good, as we already know. It is not a safe refuge for him. Thus, he wants to take refuge from the memories and wants to merge with the song of the nightingale. Dryad, as it is mentioned in the next line, means a wood nymph. So, the nightingale, which is invisible to the poet, is here compared with the magical creature. The last line of the first stanza announces that the poem is about summer. Summer symbolizes youth, of vitality, activity and action. And on the contrary of the brightness of the summer, the bird is singing from a shadow, from a dark spot. This duality in nature, the shade and the sun, in darkness and light, formulate the world of nature. In the second stanza, the poet yearns to lose himself completely into the song of the bird. He seeks inspiration from wine which has been cooled and stored from a very long time under earth. The thought of drinking wine reminds him of the romantic association of country where the wine is originated. Further, Keats brings the reference to Hippocrene. Hippocrene is a fountain on Mount Helicon in Boeotia according to Greek mythology, which is sacred to the Muses and whose water were believed to bring about poetic inspiration. Comparing the red wine with the water of the fountain, Keats wants to drink so as to be divinely inspired. He visualizes the picture of a cup full of wine which will redden his lip when he shall drink it, helping him to escape the troubled existence. In the next stanza, the poet expresses his keen desire to run away from the sorrows and suffering of this world. This bird, knowing nothing of these woes of human life, here each man sits and hears the other man groan. Old men here get afflicted with palsy, young men wither away and die prematurely. Beauty loses its charm and love loses its warmth too soon. The song of mortality is sung here by Keats. Keats in the fourth stanza gives the idea of flying to the bird with the help of wine. He will do so on the invisible wings of poetic imagination, and in the next moment he finds himself with the nightingale. The reference to the Greek god Bacchus, god of wine, is here carefully drafted image to represent mirth and pleasure while being unaware of the worldly sorrows. In the stanza 4, the poet rejects wine and turns instead to the viewless wings of poesy. Wine enables him to forget, but it dulls the senses and obstructs vision. Poetry, on the other hand, engages the imagination, enlivens the senses and empowers the poet to transcend himself and become one with the bird. Already with thee, the poet announces his imaginative oneness with the bird. The speaker perceives the nightingale's song as a immortal, imagining the bird's voice to have remained pretty much unchanged for millennia, even back to the biblical time of Ruth. Consequently, in the stanza 5, Keats imagines the nightingale's world as being dark and mysterious but full of the senses of blooming plants. This is the high point of the poem. But he is unable to sustain his illusion, thoughts of death intrude. The poet mentions that he is not able to see the flowers in the forest around him, nor tell what fragrant plants hang from the trees. The darkness surrounds him and he tries to imagine what is growing in the surrounding space. The setting reflects that it is springtime and the forest is full of grass, shrubby and fruit trees. There are hawthorns and sweet berries and purple violets hiding under the much of leaves of the forest floor, and the musk rose with its luxurious scent will be here soon, crowded by the humming mass of the flies in the summer evening. In the next stanza, the poet mentions that his mood darkens as he hears the song of the nightingale. The poet romanticizes the idea of death and personifies it in poetry is also reflected when says, I have been half in love with easeful death, called him soft names in many amused rhymes. While hearing the song of the bird, the poet embellishes that it seems like a good time to die, to end the pain of human suffering. In this stanza, the speaker also considers death as an alternative to intoxication. This would end the speaker's suffering, but as the speaker admits, it would also make the speaker a sod, meaning a piece of earth, and helping him to unable to perceive the beauty of the nightingale song. Further, the poet addresses the bird. He mentions that you weren't born to die like me, immortal nightingale. You don't have new generations of people breathing down on your neck. The immortality of art also mentioned here, as he mentions that the song he hears is the same song 100 many years ago in the time of emperors and coast jests. Perhaps it's even unchanged since biblical times when Ruth stood in the fields of corn. Ruth, a Moabite woman who stands her ground even after her husband's death and remained an epitome of kindness and compassion. It is the same song that would bring charm to open the windows of ships on dangerous seas, the same song that could be heard in the forlorn lands where fairies dwell. The repetition of the word forlorn across two stanzas has a similar effect. Forlorn closes out the 7th stanza and opens the 8th. When Keats repeats the word for us, the reader, he is repeating it in a changed mode. The last stanza is significant because it involves the reader directly. Up until this point, the object of Keats's address has been the nightingale. For example, the wording, thou was not born to death, immortal bird, I will fly to thee, and so on. In the last stanza, however, his address is split between the nightingale and the reader. The final stanza begins with the word forlorn, the last word of the preceding stanza. Here the word breaks the spell and brings the poet back to consciousness. He returns to the mortal world, where palsy shakes a few sad last grey hairs, where youth grows pale and spectre thin and dies. He confronts the reality and thus mentions the fancy cannot cheat so well as she is framed to do so. He cannot escape even with the help of the imagination. The singing of the bird grows fainter and dies away. Keats waves goodbye to the bird 3 times, saying adieu, 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 and then pronounces its music fled. The experience he has had seems so strange and confusing that he is not sure whether it was a vision or a daydream. He is even uncertain whether he is asleep or awake. Moreover, with a colon and a dash, the poem's last 5 words are swayed off from everything that precedes them. The punctuation operating here like a stage direction or cue, as Keats turns to direct his final question to the reader, do I awake or sleep? The question is insignificant, but asking isn't. At the very last minute, Keats finds his footing in the world once more. He looks for someone, talks to them, abandoning, at least for now, the misanthropic posture of the foregoing stanza for a more sociable conclusion. Here is plenty of irony in the fact that the word that promotes this change of heart is forlorn, not just sad but abandoned and alone. Although Keats says that its sound returns him to his soul self. After reading the poem, we can understand that the major theme addressed here can be pointed out through three different aspects. First, death, time and impermanence. Second, intoxication, consciousness and isolation. And thirdly, art, nature and beauty. Mentioning the qualities of John Keats, the first thing needs to be mentioned is the sensuousness and imagination. Many people call him a sensuous poet. What sensuous means? It means a poet would knows how to evoke your senses. Now we can already talked about the sensuous imageries. He in this poem evokes the reader's olfactory sense, auditory sense, and not just the visual sense only. Later we will see that in another ode on a Grecian urn, he mentions heard melodies are sweet, but those unheard are sweeter, which means that his sensuousness is not always about what is seen or felt. Rather, his sensuousness is about what he imagines. Thus, in this poem he mentions, I cannot see what flowers at my feet, nor what soft incense hangs upon the boughs, but in emblemed darkness guess each sweet, wherewith the seasonable mouth endows. So it is a strange kind of present in absent kind of scenario, where one reaches towards the abstract through the imagination, and the intervention of imagination betters the version presented in the real. Along with the sensuousness, another important thing which is associated with Keats is Hellenism and escapism. Hellenism means love for classical elements and especially Greek. All the reference to Hippocrene, Bacchus and the presence of Muse announces a silence towards Christian gods, and at the same time announces a pagan beauty. Not just Hellenism, but the kind of mysterious surrounding is a part of Keats's writing. Another thing needs to mention here is the way he uses the language through the synonyms of sleep and drowsiness. It pronounces the year of melancholy and gloominess as if the life for him is a suspension and sleep. The moment he is with the nightingale is the moment of epiphany. So, giving the final estimation, question raises that is it a poem of escapism or it is a poem about human experience? It is a poem about human experience which the poet wants to escape. It is a poem about fever and fret as well as about the musk rose and the eglantine, which provides him the creative energy. To understand Keats better, some other important works are here enlisted in this slide for your reference. So that's all for today, and I am really grateful to all of you. We had completed John Keats' Ode to a Nightingale, and soon we will meet again with another video. Till then, stay happy. Thank you for watching.